Hello and welcome along to another weekly interview from the Honest Football Podcast. This is my football story, and this week we speak to England International Fern Whelan, a brilliant player talking about opportunities in a ladies' game growing up, particularly in women's football for 10-15 years ago, and the difference in opportunities to what there is now. We talk about playing in Merseyside, an FA Cup final victory, unfortunately the heartbreak of injuries and missing out on lots of great opportunities, including the Olympic Games and other cup finals too. But we also talk about the euphoria of making an England international debut. Only the second full England international we've ever had on the channel, and her experience is absolutely fantastic talking about these things. We also talk about her current club Brighton and a spell at Notts County too, as well as the incredible mindset and mentality that's required to come back from serious injuries on multiple occasions. It's a really fascinating insight into the game, and injuries and mental health, something we've talked about a lot. And this is a really fascinating insight from someone in the pro game who's had those experiences. So I really hope you enjoy this one. If you do, please put a thumbs up on the video and let us know in the comments what you think of Fern's story. And subscribe to the channel for regular content from the podcast, including weekly interviews from people in the professional game. But this is Fern Whelan's footballing story, and we really hope you enjoy it. Okay, I'm delighted to be joined by Fern now, who's probably got one of the most unique football stories to tell of those we've had on so far. But we'll start, as we always do, with the first childhood memory for anyone involved in football, whether it be in the back garden playing, whether it be watching a game on TV. What's the first thing you remember about the game?
First thing I think was definitely just playing outdoors, just playing with my friends. A lot of friends who were boys from school, and they always just used to play in the street. We had a little cul-de-sac at the top of the road, and they were playing all the time, and I kind of was just, girls didn't play back then, so I was kind of like, can I join in? And they were like, yeah, go for it. And since then it was always about that. We'd knock on the door as soon as school finished, get the ball out, straight into the street. And I think one time it used to be David James and his friend Anthony Warner used to live in the corner. And they'd always just come out and have a little hello with us, and kind of were playing about and stuff. And that was kind of the first memory for me. It was always just David James in the corner. I was a big Liverpool fan as well, so absolutely loved it every time he came round. So that was the first, I think, definitely, yeah.
That's not a bad way to start.
No.
What about watching the game, whether it be a game on TV or going to the stadium, whatever may have come first? What's the first game you remember watching?
I remember, well, the ones obviously that stick out in my mind is, I remember watching, it won't be the first game, but the Champions League final, obviously Liverpool playing in that when we were down 3-0 at half time. I remember watching it in the house, family, all avid Liverpool supporters. So there was flags everywhere, all around the house, everything. And half time, my mum just couldn't watch anymore. She went straight out into the kitchen, started cooking food, anything to distract her. And then bit by bit, she was listening to it on the radio still. And obviously the first goal goes in, then the second, then the third, and the house just erupts, goes absolutely crazy. So it was, really good memory watching that Champions League final, especially as we won it as well. So
Absolutely. That game's been quite popular on this podcast already, I've got to say.
That's it. It just sticks out, doesn't it?
Oh, it's one that people pick out all the time, particularly the Liverpool fans we've had on for obvious reasons.
Yeah, I think my brother-in-law, he went as well. So he was in the stadium, and he's called us to say half-time, oh, we're not going to win, blah, blah, blah. And then he rang half an hour later, and he's bouncing and really excited. So, yeah, it was good.
Brilliant. I bet he had the best seat in the house for that one.
Yeah, he did. Better than ours.
Absolutely. What about for you playing competitively? Because this is always an interesting thing we've had with female footballers on before, is depending on the generation, there's always been a bit of disparity in when competitive football was able to be played, because there were obviously limited opportunities in times gone by. So when did that journey start for you competitively?
I think it wasn't until I got scouted for England probably originally. So when I think it was under 15, so I was probably like 13 at the time, was the first time I'd ever thought, oh, I can actually do something with football. I think before that, I say it was just playing in the park, playing with friends and going to summer tournaments, not really thinking anything of it. So I think it was that when I first got scouted under 15 level. And then when I signed for Everton, age 16, that was my first real experience of playing like competitive women's football.
And talk to me about the opportunities at that age group in particular, because it's something that particularly now for, I guess, your generation and younger has improved quite significantly. And some that we've had on from the generation before talked about there not really being any competitive football until adulthood. Is it something that
Yeah.
you've seen improve as you've gone along? Or?
Oh yeah, massively. I think now obviously you only have to look at kind of like the academies and things that kids can go straight into. I think I played for Tranmere Centre of Excellence as well, so that was kind of our hub of all like the best players in Liverpool used to go over and play there. There wasn't even a Liverpool Centre of Excellence really at the time. I had to go over to Tranmere, which was like half an hour every week for me and my family and the mum and stuff. So I think that was more, but even then it wasn't really competitively. That was more like where people could pick you up from. So we do a summer tournament once a year down in Warwick, and that's when all the England scouts would come, and that's when you had your real chance of being picked up for anything competitively. And then it was more so playing for the England under 17s when we got to travel and we got to do tournament football. I think really was the first start with competitive football. I think the under 19s was probably the first Euros and championships, whereas now obviously I think they have the 17s World Cup and the 17s Euros now. So as the years have gone on, there's been more opportunities to start playing competitive younger, whereas it wasn't as much back then.
And then talk to me from there about moving into the professional club game, because obviously that opportunity, as you mentioned, came quite quickly after that, getting spotted for England. Obviously your talent stood out pretty early on. And unfortunately, not long after that, we're going to have to lead into probably what will be one of the main topics after, which will be injuries. But talk to me about first getting picked up and becoming a professional or involved in the professional side of the game at club level.
Yeah, I think it was more just when I was playing for England, I was kind of going from strength to strength at the younger age group. So at like the 17s, I was playing at the age of 15, and at the under 19s, I was playing at the age of 16. So I was always kind of the baby in the group. But I think I was managing to still start games, even being so young and things like that, and playing in and around. Like obviously, you got the likes of like Jill Scott, Eni Aluko, they're all like 3 years above me, but I was still playing in and around them. So I think at that point, Mo Marley was our manager at England, and she was the Everton manager at the time. So she was the one who kind of first picked me up, and then I played my first game for Everton. I think it was against Charlton, and at that time you had a lot of high profile players playing. So I think I was 16 and I started straight away. So it was quite daunting to start off with. And I was training obviously with the likes of Farah and, you know, Jill and Rachel Unit, players like that. So I think when I started, I was like, whoa, am I really good enough to be around these players? But, you know, I settled in fine, and I really did enjoy it. And they were the first kind of real memories of playing at that kind of top flight.
So tell me a bit more about the mentality for the debut, because this has been probably the question that's had the biggest variety in answer from people who are absolutely petrified of it, because like you say, you're alongside massive names that you've watched on TV or whatever, compared to some people who just relish in it and can't wait to get out there and show that they're the top amongst them. Which sort of group were you in, or were you somewhere between the two?
Do you know what? I feel like at the time I just had no fear whatsoever. I feel like I was just loving football, loving playing. And as I said before, I really was on a bit of a high with football. So I felt like I was a bit weird, but I felt a bit untouchable at the time. So I was kind of like, you know, I've been picked, so I must be doing something right. And I think my manager at Liverpool at the time was quite reluctant to let me go, because I was just about to start playing for Liverpool's first team there. So, you know, I'd had a lot of coaches instill quite a bit of confidence in me, and I felt comfortable under Mo, and she put a lot of trust in me at playing at such a young age, and the girls that I was playing alongside were great at the time. So yeah, I think I was just excited to get going, and I think it was all just a bit of a blur to start off with, because the first season just went so quick, but it was kind of like that was my first chance to get bedded in, and I loved it. I really did.
I guess we will skip on now to what was supposed to be your big breakthrough season, which was the 07-08, where you started brilliantly. I think you still ended up winning Young Player of the Year, if I remember rightly. But unfortunately, that's where the story with injury starts as well.
Yeah.
So talk to me about the first half of the season, where obviously you're flying along, you're doing really well, and then how you react when probably for the first time you're then hit by a massive injury.
Yeah, it was the first time, to be fair. I've been fine up until then. I think we'd just come back from Iceland, so it's the first time the England under 19s had ever got to a final. And I'd captained them there, and I think I'd won player of the tournament as well out of all the countries then. So I really was enjoying life, playing football, doing quite well. So that was I think that was in the August, September, and then the injury came in the build up to our World Cup year to go to Chile.
Yeah.
So we play, I can't remember, I think we were playing against Leicester, I think it was FA Cup game. And yeah, it was just a really freak tackle, like completely out of nowhere, quite a high challenge. The girl took my knee out, and yeah, pretty much every ligament in my knee snapped, unfortunately. So she got me good. So yeah, it was pretty much that proper put a spanner in the works, because I've been doing really well. I think I played in every round as well, leading up to the League Cup final that we got to as well in 2008. So I was gutted to miss the final of that one. I think I did the injury, and about a week later we were due to go to Chile as like a pre-camp tour with the under-20s. And I remember being on the phone to Mo, and she's obviously like, "How are you?" And I'm sat with my leg up in a brace, and I'm like, "Yeah, no, I'm fine. I'll be on the plane next week. I'll be there." And she's like, I don't think you will, because I hadn't had the results of the scan back yet at this point. So I just assumed it would settle down, because, as you say, I'd never been injured before. So yeah, it came as a bit of a shock. It took a bit of acceptance and getting used to that. You know, it was going to be a 6 to 9 month period. So it was a long road after that. And as you say, yeah, I still managed to get Player of the Year for the performances for Young Player of the Year. So that was something I was really proud of, and it kind of gave me a bit of a push and a bit of a kick to get back to the World Cup in Chile, which I managed to do, which I was made up with.
Well, that was sort of my next question from it, because again, we've had a couple of people talking about injuries, and some that have probably had a big struggle in mentality at that point and have never come back to the same level, and have been quite honest about that. But for you, it was very much the opposite, and has been a number of times since. So what sort of drives that mentality for you for coming back and reaching the same level again? Because it's something that seems to be quite rare from the people we've spoken to.
Yeah, I think I've always had, I think up until that point, I was just striving to play for England at whatever level I could. And, you know, I'd come so close. I'd helped the team qualify for the World Cup at that point. And for me, it wasn't even an option really not to come back. I think because I'd never been injured before, it was just like, well, we'll get over it and then we'll go to the World Cup. It was literally that simple in my head. So I think I've always had that kind of outlook, that I look towards the next thing once the injury's done, because at some point the injury will be healed and it'll be fixed. And as much as I could, I wanted to then get back and achieve that pre-level that I was playing at. And I think I've always managed to keep that mentality over the last however 10, 15 years, when injuries have kept striking me along the way. So yeah, I mean, it must just be something in me. It must be something in my family. I think I'm always trying to make my family proud as well. So I think I've always got that drive behind me of getting back for them, not just for myself. And I must have a really high pain threshold.
It's brilliant to hear the mentality, because I mean, we've all suffered with injuries. We talked about it in quite a lot of depth, and I can honestly say I haven't got the same motivation to get back from injury when I had it. So I appreciate that entirely. But let's talk about some of your highlights moving forward. We'll come to senior international honours soon, but I guess redemption for you, you mentioned about missing one of the cup finals because of injury. Then in 2010, you got the chance to play in a cup final in the FA Cup. So talk to me about that one, and talk to me about, I know it was coming on as a substitute and it was after a long injury layoff, and you might not have even perhaps been back to your full best at that point, but just the experience of playing in it. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny actually, because that's still probably one of my favourite games, even though, as you said, I did come on as a sub, which, to be honest, I only found out the night before the game that I wasn't playing. I was due to start that final, as I played in all the other rounds as well. So it was actually quite a big shock the night before when, you know, Mo just turned around to me and was just like, I think it was potentially because of the injury backlog and stuff. It's kind of like, you know, I'm gonna go with Emily today because kind of confidence wise and things like that. And I was shocked. I was gutted. Don't get me wrong. And then I think in the game, you know, the way it was going, it was looking like Arsenal were getting back into things. I think quite a few of our back line were on bookings as well, so they were potentially going to get sent off. And I did not expect to come on at all. You don't as a centre half. You really don't. You just think, well, you know, the game will be done. And it was just before 60 minutes, and she brought me on, and I was literally thrust into the action of it straight away. I think I've gone on, and within about 2 minutes, I was in a 1v1 with Gemma Davidson. So I had no time to really bed into the game. That was it. I think I put my first slide and tackle in, and then I was good to go. I was fine. And obviously went extra time. So yeah, I played a good 60 minutes in that game. So I loved it, really enjoyed it. And it was just, it was nice because we've been like rivaling with Arsenal for so long, for however many years, and it had always been them first or second, them first or second. And it was so good. And that team of players that we had at the time as well, like we really gelled, we really got on. And to be able to celebrate with them and afterwards as well, like it's just a memory that we always kind of talk about and cherish. And it really was a brilliant day. And I could go on and be like, nobody scored past me, so that was quite good as a defender as well. And that's always one of the things, is all you can do is keep a clean sheet as a defender, which I was proud of doing as well. And I think after the game, my manager come up to me and was like, what was kind of, I wish you'd managed to play a bit more of a part in it, but you did yourself justice when you came on and stuff, so you should be really proud of yourself, which I was, because the disappointment of not starting to then play and finish, again, it's the story of my career a little bit, but it was brilliant. It was a great day.
Fantastic. And I guess we're going to move slightly back towards the international side the following year, and it's where, I know you'd been in a squad before, but senior international caps came for the first time. So talk to me about the process of being called up, finding out that you're in the squads, and then finding out that you were going to make your appearance, and that moment where you're called from the bench.
Yeah, I think it's quite funny because my mum will she'll call me the standby kid, because the amount of letters I used to get through the post when I was in the under-19s and 21s, like, you're on standby for the next England camp, you're on standby, and then finally getting picked in a squad to go away out of merit, not out of anybody getting injured or something, was amazing. She'd be celebrating around the house and things like that, so that was really good and really positive. And as I said, I'd always been involved in that setup, so for me it was a bit weird, because I always thought I would get there, I just didn't know when, and all like the positive feedback I'd have from coaches and things like that. So I finally felt like I'd got myself fit and got myself back into a position where I could compete, and compete on that level, because I played, as I'd say, like numerous friendlies for the seniors and things like that, and we'd go away on training camps to La Manga every year, so we'd always have friendlies against Norway and teams like that. But to actually get like the first call up to be part of the squad and on the bench, you never really thought you'd get a chance to come on. But Hope had always kind of said to me, you will get a chance here. And there's so many of the games, you say for a centre half, you wouldn't get your chance because they'd be so tight. It'd be 0-0. So it's probably a couple of games before that I could have potentially played and stuff. But when they're so close cut, you don't really bring a defender on, you bring your strikers on. So I'd see many people coming on and be like, okay, this is my chance. Then eventually I got to come on, and it was amazing. It was a great feeling, and it was just to finally get a cap for England after so long of playing for the youth setups. Was a really proud moment for myself and for my family, and one that I won't ever forget, even though I might not have had as many as what I'd have liked to.
But no one can ever take away that you've played for your country.
Exactly.
Do you remember the main emotion when you were standing on the touchline waiting to come on?
Fear.
That's a very honest answer.
Yeah, no, I think at the time, because I'd gone through so many injuries, and people had kept putting their faith back in me and kept, repaying that faith. I mean, I'd worked hard, don't get me wrong. I worked really hard to get back to where I did. But I think at the time it was the young kid that first started at 16 who was completely fear-free had probably, started to melt away a little bit in terms of I was actually wanting to do well so much that then the nerves kick in and it starts getting a bit more nerve-wracking, because the moment you've been waiting for so many years has finally arose. I think I was in the standby squad for the Euros the year before, and again the same for the World Cups, the standby squad. So finally getting a chance to be in a team and play with those players was it was amazing.
And tell me a bit about Hope Howe as well. It's something I'm quite interested to ask you, because she was probably, I guess for me growing up, the first face of women's England football when it became a mainstream media event, and seems to be quite a quite iconic figure as a result in the women's game. How was it like playing under her and working under her? Because we've never really interviewed someone who's had the opportunity to. So
yeah, I think after being in the youth squads for quite a while, and you dip in and out of the seniors and things like that. So at first I didn't really get a chance to know Hope to start off with, because you'd go up for a camp and then you'd go back down to your age group, to the 20s. And it was only really in like my last 2 years of being involved in England that I got to really to know well as a coach. And like the attention to detail, the technical aspect of their coaching is second to none, is brilliant. And that's, I learned so much under her, even in the short time that I was kind of playing for her. And that's why I returned down to Brighton when I knew the opportunity would arise to play under her again, because I really wanted to continue develop even in the latter part of my career. So she's obviously stern and like knows what she wants out of players and can be quite hard on players, but I think that's how she, how she gets the best out of players sometimes.
And then I guess, unfortunately, we have to go back to talking about injury shortly afterwards, because the next 2 years, your record in terms of playing games was non-existent, unfortunately. And I guess probably as a British player, two, unfortunately, of the most important years, because you would have potentially been involved in an Olympics, obviously, as well. Talk to me about the mentality for that one as well, because that must have been so difficult then.
Yeah, I think that year was a killer, to be honest. That was probably the hardest couple of years because, as you say, 2012 year, I actually did the injury that led up to my operation playing for England in the Cyprus Cup. So, again, thought I was going to get my break. I was doing well, finally playing tournament football for England, started the game, and I think within about 15 minutes of being on the pitch, I had to come off because my knee just wasn't happy. And we got back, spoke to the England doc. We went into London, spoke to the surgeon, and he's obviously rescanned it and said it's a reoccurrence of what's happened before. The knee wasn't in a good condition from the 4 years before, and it needed an operation basically. And it was one that was. He told me, it could be career ending. It might be. I might never get back from it, but minimum you're looking at 18 months kind of thing before you return. So at that point as well, I had the letter to say, you're in the final 30 for the Olympic squad. So it only had to cut down by 7 more people. So I think by that point I was absolutely devastated, to be honest, because I was just so close to coming back and being involved. But, I said, well, it was kind of, I had no choice because I was in pain, unfortunately. I couldn't play in the pain I was in, and I wasn't actually doing myself a justice by trying to play through it because I couldn't physically move very well. So so I just came to the decision with the England doctor that was going to be the decision I'd make. I'd have the operation, and again, in my mind, there was still no, I was ignoring them. I was never going to play again. It was, okay, well, can I get back in 12? And he's told me 18, I want to get back in 12. I was always trying to shorten the timescales. So I had the operation in the July, I think it was, and then went straight to the Olympics and watched them anyway. So went and supported the girls anyway, and it was hard, don't get me wrong, it was tough. It was a tough couple of years, and I think that was probably at the point where, as you say, no games in that long space of time is really hard, really isolating, and probably my most mentally draining couple of years that I think I've had out of all the injuries I've had, probably because I was so close. I think at that point. So going and watching obviously the next couple of years, and especially at a time when so many players left Everton as well. It was that made it even tougher because we've had so many highs. We were so close to Arsenal. We obviously beat Arsenal. I think we lost the league on goal difference one year, and that was devastating. I played in that game as well. I don't think I got over that for a while. So it was so close to being a league winner in that sense as well. So, and then in those 2 years, a lot of my friends left. They moved on, went to obviously Man City, to Liverpool, teams like that, and it was kind of like I'd missed the gap of where, we were probably meant to have achieved quite a lot more in that sense. And when I did come back, it was Mo left then, so she left and Andy Spence took over. So a lot had changed in the 2 years of being out. It was really quite a strange environment to come back into. So it was kind of at that point that I felt like I wanted to give it a go, I wanted to come back, and then potentially I might need a change at some point soon.
You mentioned something really interesting there, which was about going to follow and watch the team still. And again, it's something that a couple of people have mentioned before when they've been injured and they just couldn't face it, going to watch the games that they know they should have been involved in, particularly the biggest ones. They found that a huge mental block. Obviously, you mentioned that you went and watched the Olympic Games matches. Was that ever a doubt for you, or were you always going to go and do that?
To be honest, it wasn't even a plan. It was kind of it was a last minute thing, and I think one of my friends was just like, I can get us some tickets if you want to go, kind of like. And I was still on crutches. I still had a brace on my knee. I'd only just got out the house, to be honest. But it was tough. Don't get me wrong. It was really hard. But I went with a good friend of mine who potentially if it was a couple of years down the line, she would have gone as well. So I think we were kind of in a similar boat that we both would have loved to have been there, but we just went and celebrated for the girls anyway. And, it was never going to happen again for a long time in this country. So when we've obviously got friends in that team. So I think over the last couple of years, before that injury, I'd learned to support. Like I was out for a while with the first injury, so I'd learned what it felt like to be supporting rather than playing.
Talk about the second injury. The one other question I wanted to ask on it is, having the first one a few years earlier, And again, there's different answers to this. Did it make the second one easier or harder for you?
So the first one, I didn't actually have an operation. I completely ruptured my PCL cruciate ligament and my lateral ligament as well. So, but the surgeon at the time, they don't operate on that ligament. So they basically said, we're going to let it heal and things. So it was weird because I had an injury, but I hadn't had the operation. So it was kind of like, I didn't know whether it was fixed or I didn't really know what was going on. It was more just play on it. So I played on that for 4 years without that getting fixed at all, but still being completely ruptured. So I think the first one was shorter in time scale, so obviously it was easier. I was younger. It was the first time it had ever happened to me. And in my mind, I didn't really have any doubt that I was going to get back. Whereas the second one, when that happened, obviously the time scales were going to be longer. It was potentially going to be career ending. And it was at a time when I probably would have been at my peak in terms of getting into those squads, going to the Olympics, like playing. So yeah, I think the second one was definitely harder, especially with all the change that went on at Everton at the time. Yeah. And I was contracted by England at that point as well through central contract. So they supported me through the whole 2 years of it. And then just as I was due to come back, the England manager changed. So unfortunately for me, that's when I lost my England contract as well. So quite a lot changed over that course of 2 years. So there was a lot of adapting to be done.
I'm glad you've mentioned something else I was going to bring up actually, which is probably one of the most notable differences even still now between the men's and the women's game, which is that England women's football team sort of have this central contract system, almost like in cricket. I guess in England's probably the most similar sport. Talk to me about the differences of that to being contracted just as a club player.
Yeah, so they first introduced it quite a few years ago when obviously the league wasn't professional. But they needed to allow the England players more time to train and more time to focus because a lot of people had jobs. I'm a physiotherapist as well, so I was studying at the time for that. So they wanted to allow the players more time and knew the only way they could do that was by to pay them. So they started off with a set wage, which was quite low at the time compared to what it is now. And I think over the years, they've just incrementally increased it. And it's still running now. Now, obviously, it's slightly different now because it's a professional league, whereas back then it was obviously semi-professional, if anything. So I don't know what they'll do going forward in the future, as you say, compared to like the men's sides and things like that. They obviously don't have it, and that's why it was originally included. I think it will continue because they want the women's team to be able to prosper as long as possible. So they want to give them as much time to dedicate to focusing on their training and allow them as much time to play. I mean, there is still players in teams now that I know that are still doing 2 jobs. So obviously they're the ones who don't play for England. So it's just they need to get the league to a level where everybody can play professionally and not need a side amount of money, really.
I know it's a slight side note, but obviously one of the things that happened earlier this year or late last year was the announcement about the sponsorship of the Women's Super League and sort of a big money investment from it. Is that and obviously TV rights come in with it as well. Is that something that is talked about within the game, or is it something that you don't really concern yourself with? Because obviously it has the potential to have a huge impact, as you say, give the opportunity to make the league fully professional and increase the wages to a level where people can do it as their primary job.
I mean, I think it came up at the start when it happened and all the players were, really happy with it, made up that finally they've managed to get a really good sponsor for the league, bring in some money, some TV, hopefully some publicity for it. And then I think as players, once you know that's there, you then just get on with your job pretty much and continue as normal. But knowing that in the background, things are slowly starting to change, hopefully. And one investor comes in, hopefully that attracts another. And, we just need to increase that over the next however many years, depending on obviously what happens now with COVID and things. Hopefully it doesn't stunt too much of the women's growth because it was flying at the time.
Absolutely. So let's go back to your career. You mentioned coming back and the big changes at Everton, which led quite quickly after to a move. And that move was to Notts County. So talk to me about the process behind the move. Obviously, you sort of touched on why you knew it was time to leave Everton, but did you have more than one interest at the time? And if so, how did you then choose between options?
Yeah, I think at the time, it was actually the year before. So Rick had came in for me the year before when I just, obviously first come out of my injury. I'd come back and he came in and obviously everything had happened with Andy and things. And I wanted to give Everton another year just to see how we'd kind of go, give myself a chance of playing, not dive straight into full-time football. And I think at the time there'd been kind of talks of other clubs as well in the local area. So potentially Liverpool, City, things like that. And at the time I was kind of like, I want to play. I want to get back into playing as much as possible and more regularly. So I left it a year, and obviously that year was tough as well, trying to get back. There was games in, games out, things like that, just trying to get my knee used to playing again. And obviously when Everton then got relegated, it was a shame, and it was devastating because the amount of time and effort we put into Everton as a club, it's obviously built it so high. It really was gutting, but I think it kind of just gave me the push I needed to actually move on. Whereas I'm not sure I would have done it if they'd have stayed in the league, because I'm a home bird and things like that. I probably would have just stayed at Everton for the rest of my career, to be honest, and never experienced anything different. So it was the right time, and Rick got back in contact, and at that point I was happy to go. I was keen. Notts County had a really good team at the time. We're doing really well, and a lot of my previous friends from England and stuff were playing for them. I was like Carly Telford and Ellen and players like that were all there. So it wasn't too hard of a decision. I was only 2 hours from home, and the draw of still playing in that league and playing back around that calibre of players really set me on my target to, okay, there was me again. I'm going to go back and play for England once I've got back in this league and really put myself with the best players and playing against the best players still.
Talk to me about your highlights in the 2 years in Notts County, because as you mentioned, after 2 years out of the game, it was a chance to play regular football again. Was it just that in itself a relief, or was it always looking for more? Were you chasing England still at that point then?
Yeah, always looking for more. Always looking for more. I never can settle ever for some reason. I was always looking for more, and I think every time kind of I was playing in and around these players, a lot of international players in the team, and at the time we had about 10 of us were full time, the rest were part time. So it was nice to be in around that full time environment every day. I was pushing myself, training twice a day, getting really challenged by the players I was training amongst, and I was actually playing quite well in quite a lot of the games, and I think there was talk of potentially might get a bit of a call up here, things like that. So I was always pushing for that, and it never came, unfortunately. But for me, it was about starting to really enjoy football again, and scoring goals, being in and around the WSL, putting myself back out there, and I think I did that. And there was a couple of setbacks, a couple of little injuries along the way, but there wasn't anything too major that I thought, I can't continue. So I just wanted to play there for as long as possible, and unfortunately we got liquidated. So that was.
Well, I was going to ask you about this, because it seems after 2 seasons you were happy to stay, you were happy to sign a deal, and then was it the day before the season, wasn't it, where they liquidated?
Yeah.
So obviously quite quickly after that you ended up briefly back at Everton.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that couple of weeks or months, because that must have been a pretty interesting time.
Oh, it was a nightmare of a time, to be honest, because as you say, we were settled, and obviously when you're full time, you're in housing. So I lived with 3 other girls on the team, and we literally found out, we had a text on Thursday, you've got a meeting tomorrow morning instead of training now. So then we're all joking in the house, imagine if the club gets liquidated, blah, 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 not thinking that would ever happen. Go into the meeting, and then that's it. You've got no job. So no job, and then a month later you need to leave your house, and it was bizarre. It was like, right, okay, now what do I do? I found myself applying for full-time physio jobs and everything, because I just didn't know what the next step was going to be. For me, it wasn't as clear cut as I'm going to carry on playing. At that point I contemplated stopping playing, just potentially because a lot of the teams as well were halfway through their season or about to be in their season, so they had their teams and rosters all sorted. So it was a very strange time. So I think halfway through we spoke to Andy, and he was like, yeah, you can come and train, come and play, whatever. So signed there for a little bit, but it didn't fit. And I think at the time I was still undecided on what I was going to do, whether I was going to continue playing and things. So I took a month out after that spring series finished, because I was still struggling with a knee injury at the time as well. So I think I was kind of like, I don't really know what I'm going to do. So that was bizarre, all really weird. And then really just randomly I spoke to the Brighton assistant coach down here, and she said, we'd love to have you on board. I thought, oh my God, Brighton, that's a long way. Like, that really is a long way. I'm not too sure. So came down, come down the train, had a look around the setup and the facilities. And, I was blown away, to be honest. I've never not experienced anything like that in the whole time I've been playing, really, apart from Everton. But even there, you kind of have to segregate yourself from the men and stuff, whereas it's very inclusive down here. And I fell in love straight away, to be honest. I was like, that's me, that's me, and that's football, and that's the type of football I want to be playing. Like, I absolutely loved my time at Notts, but it was never the professional setup because it just couldn't be because of money. So yeah, decided to sign after speaking to Hope as well, who pushed me in the final direction. I think I was still a bit undecided, and she was just put it in black and white. Do you want to play football or not? So so that did it for me, really, and I just came down, and obviously been down here ever since. So yeah.
You mentioned something else which has cropped up in a lot as well, which is the decision to move a long way from home or where you've been playing most of your career. So it's something that has cropped up a lot, and depending on different stages of careers, whether you're going to make the move 200 miles down the country or whatever it may be. What was the thought process like there for you, or was it just football comes first here?
It did take a lot. It did take a lot of the decision making and stuff. And I don't think it was until the October that I ended up like signing, really. So that shows how long it was. Kind of missed the whole pre-season and everything that the girls had done because I was just so up and down. I was kind of and ahhing on what I wanted to do. But yeah, I think at that point, after it really was that conversation with Hope, that she just kind of said, do you want to carry on or do you want to stop? And I was like, well, I don't really want to stop yet. I don't think I'm done yet. I still think I've got a couple of more years to give. And that was it, really. It was kind of, football will come first, and I can see my family as and when is possible. So, I mean, I don't think I realised just how far it was. But yeah, I think at the time it was a bit of a no-brainer and an experience that I probably would never have got if I hadn't have done it.
And there's a few interesting points we've got to touch on for playing at Brighton. I guess the first and foremost, and more importantly now, is what's it like to play with a spouse?
Fine, it's all I've known. It's all I've known for the last 5 years. So, yeah, I'm used to it. Yeah, it's fine. Not a problem at all. We've obviously got separate friends and actually don't see each other most of the days. So.
It's something interesting, actually, particularly from a career-wise moving forward, because a lot of the players speak about later in their careers thinking about family and husbands or wives or whatever when moving on to new clubs. Is that something that you guys have to contemplate if there's ever a time where you can't both play for Brighton or the same club then?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I think at the time, like, if we both weren't playing for Brighton, because we obviously both left Notts, I think if we both weren't signing for Brighton, it wouldn't have been an option for one to come down and one not to. It was just too far to do so. Whereas I don't think that would affect us now down the line. As long as like 2 different clubs were local, we can always play for different clubs. It's not the end of the world. But I think at the time, because we were moving so far, like, the distance would have been horrendous. So I think it's just, it's obviously doable now to separate and do whatever way football throws you.
And then back to football at your current club. Obviously, as we've touched on briefly, this year has been a bit of a unique one, countrywide and football-wide in particular. Bit of an early end to the season. What's the process been like for you? Because I know, again, injuries have cropped up during the time at Brighton. Talk to me about recovering from a third series.
To be honest, this one was, I think, probably, would I say, the hardest? Yeah, I'd say so, because I'd always said, if came down here, I was like, if I get another serious one, that is me done. I can't take it. Like, the thing is, I can handle most things that most people can't. So it's like, people will roll their ankle and be out for 2 weeks and be like, oh my God, I'm out for 2 weeks. I'm like, oh, that's nothing. That's fine. So I think, like, obviously at my time at Brighton, playing in the WSL2 Championship, getting us promoted and things like that, I probably played the most games I've played in a long time in that season, and had a couple of little, like, Achilles, niggly injuries, whatever along the way. But then I was feeling really good coming into this season after speaking with Hope and about, we'll see how this year goes in terms of playing as many games as possible, and potentially the most important one, shall we say, just to see how many I can get out, really. And I was feeling good. Went into pre-season in Spain in August, and silly of me to be a defender, but we were doing a shooting drill. So I probably should have been shooting in the first place. But it was the last day of the tour, so the whole week, got through the whole week unscathed, to be honest. Felt fine, felt really fit. I've gone to strike a ball and my ankle has just completely gone from underneath me. And I knew at that point I'd done something. I didn't know how bad, but I knew it wasn't great. So we came back, and it wasn't until the September, October, really, of trying to play through this injury that I actually got it looked at. We played on it for quite a while, which probably shouldn't have happened, but we got to October, had it scanned, and it came back that the ligament had completely gone. There was nothing there. So I went and seen a specialist, and he was like, look, the only way of doing this is going in a boot. We'll try it in a boot for 4 weeks, see if it heals. So we did that, came back, had it rescanned, it still hadn't healed. So I was like, do you know what? I'm going to play on it. I don't want it operated on. I'm going to play as long as I can because I don't want another operation. So I think the last game I played was Birmingham at the Amex. We played 90 minutes or whatever, managed to hit my ankle in the last minute of the game. And I think it was just kind of a sign that, this isn't going away. I can't do this all season and have my ankle keep going at the end of games and things, because I was missing the week but playing on the weekend.
That's it. Yeah.
So it just wasn't working. So we went back to the specialist in December, and he was like, I'm probably gonna have to fix it for you. So we went for the option of fixing the whole thing, so I had a full ligament reconstruction inside and outside. So pretty much everything you could think of was done, just because I knew, I don't know how many years I've got left playing. I just wanted to make sure I had a good ankle. I don't want have them problems. So I think the realization of having to have another operation took its toll, because I was just like, I can't physically do this again. But I came out of it and done a lot of rehab, was ready to play.
And then this happened.
was ready to play, I think I had my first training session back on the grass, and was the last one just before we got called for COVID to go home and not come back. So carried on with the program, carried on with the rehab, was waiting for the day where it was going to be, we'll go back. And it never came. So unfortunately didn't get to play those last 6 games, I think it was, we had. So that was a shame. That was a real shame. But I mean, I'm just happy that I've got a healthy ankle and it was fixed at the time it was. Otherwise I could be left in, God knows, bad knee and bad ankle.
Hopefully you get to start next season at the normal time.
Well, we shall see. Yeah, we shall see.
The last thing I wanted to mention, again, you touched on it very quickly, was Brighton being involved in promotion. Talk to me about that season and the feeling in the dressing room. Did you almost get that sense as you went along? Is it a confidence thing, or is it more just you felt you were better than the opposition? Was it as simple as that? Because a lot of time it comes down to mentality and confidence for most people.
Yeah, I think obviously in the team as well, like myself and Aileen and Danny Bewitt and stuff, we played it in WSL 1 for the whole of our careers. So it was kind of an idea that we're going to go here and we're going to get this team promoted. That was the aim, and that was the aim from the minute we got there to the end of the season. That was always going to be the case. So I think we were surprised when some of the games we drew or we lost points and stuff. We were really kind of like, oh, okay, we might up our game a little bit here, because it's not going to be a walk in the park. It's actually quite a tough league and stuff. So yeah, it was a good season though, and we got better as the games went on, because you got a lot of players trying to bed into a new team as well. I think that was quite important, that we managed to build a real team spirit and things like that, and a new manager as well. Everyone was getting used to Hope at the time and that playing style and things like that as well. So everyone was just really happy to get the team back up there, where that was the aim all along.
Let's go on to some quick fire ones before the final question. As you've had quite an illustrious career, it would be a shame not to talk about them. So let's go through the best player you've played with and against.
With, I would say Farah Williams, brilliant in training, true professional and technically brilliant. Against, that's a good question. Probably Kelly Smith, to be honest. I mean, it goes without saying, she's unbelievable, probably the best player in our time. So
not too bad names to be able to name off there.
No.
Let's go on to manager. Again, you've mentioned a few who were very important in your career, but who would, if you had to pick out one, maybe not a best, but a favourite to play under or most influential, who would you go for?
Mo Morley, hands down.
Nice and easy.
Yeah. She always she'd take the time out to do that little bit extra with you, and if there's things you wanted to work on and stuff, she was always there, and it was always a phone call away. I think that's really important as a manager, to be able to have that personal side with your players.
And then the final question we like to ask, and again we'll let you have two because you're obviously a professional in the game, is we ask people what their favourite game is. So if you can have one that you've been involved in as a player, and then one that perhaps as a fan or just watching as a football fan that you enjoyed.
As a player, I would say probably that FA Cup final win against Arsenal. That does really stick out. There's a few more, but I think that one definitely sticks out. And watching, I think you've already had it from me. It's got to be the Champions League.
That's the fourth time that one's been picked.
But to be fair, last year's Champions League win as well wasn't too bad. So
that's not a problem. I'm not surprised it's been the most popular one on the series, because it's probably one of the most memorable games, certainly in my life. So I've got no problem with you picking it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing your time with us and sharing your full experiences of a career. We wish you all the best with your, hopefully, recovery from injury now, as you seem to be on the way back. And fingers crossed next season we'll get to start at a normal point and you'll be able to get games under your belt again.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for joining us.